The Pitch and Prime podcast is presented by Brew HQ, your home brewing headquarters. At Brew HQ, we love everything about beer. Our team of brewing experts has over 2 decades of experience, and we want to pass that knowledge and experience on to you. Whether you're just starting out or are an advanced brewer, Brew HQ has everything you need. But we're more than just premium brewing ingredients and quality equipment. We're a complete brewing experience. For a limited time, save 10% off your first purchase at Brew HQ. Enter code BREWPOD10 at checkout. Brew HQ. Life is beautiful.
If you remember last month, we had Eric Cousineau, president and founder of GTA Brews and the GTA Brew Slam, and got the scoop on what it takes to run a brew competition. If you missed that episode, feel free to check it out on your favorite podcast service, and then make your way back here. This is part 2 of the Homebrew competition series. Today we're going to flip the previous perspective and talk to a few seasoned beer judges about their travels into brew culture. Angeline McLennan shares her story about the balancing act between partner, mom, nurse, and Atlantic Canada's first female Cicerone. We also welcome Stefan Gagliardi, master brewer for the revitalized and historic original Alexander Keiths Brewery. He takes us deeper into the sensory experience and evaluation of a particular beer. That and more coming up. I'm your host, Jonathan Primack. Sitting down here with Angeline McLennan at Brew HQ headquarters here. Thanks for being with us, Angeline.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. Angeline is a beer educator overall, a certified BJCP, certified Cicerone, a labor and delivery nurse, and a mom. How do you fit it all in?
It's pretty labor intensive. Pun intended. I try to manage my time with the beer stuff as best I can. It's kind of taken a backseat lately, right. But whenever I get the opportunity to, it's pretty fun.
Because you're stuck in this kind of purgatory where, I mean, beer is not your financial income. The beer industry is not your income. I know you do some odd jobs within the industry, but it's really for the love, the passion, the hobby. And it takes up quite a bit of your time, so it must be a challenge to manage all that.
But it's fun. It's one of those things. It's a side gig that when I do get to do it, I love doing it. I love working.
It's an escape almost.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. And I think we met probably about 60 years ago or so. I remember we were at the ACBAs, and we were. The first ACBAs, the Atlantic Canadian Brewing Awards, and we were stewarding. And I'd only been in the industry myself a year or two at the time, so I don't know what your story. My recollection of your involvement goes back to that day. So tell me a little bit before that. How did you get involved in the industry or in the beer scene at all?
Well, that was actually probably my first foray into the beer scene as well. I had been off on maternity leave prior to that, and my sister was looking for a new job, and she was talking about becoming a sommelier, so I was looking into different sommelier programs with her and found this one for Ciceroning, a beer sommelier, which was brand new to me, and I didn't have a day job to wake up for, so I thought studying beer, I didn't have anything more important to do on that leave, I thought studying beer could be a pretty fun thing to get into. So stewarding that ACBAs was my first competition, with the BJCP. Tracy Philippi, who was here at the time, had advised me to start stewarding and start earning points there, just kind of see what the competitions are about, and I think Tracy is responsible for many of us. Oh, I think half the scene here is from Tracy setting it up.
And she, of course, moved back home to Wisconsin after having her first child. Kind of a empty hole, I'd say, in the industry since she left. She really motivated a lot of folks in a lot of competitions. She actually wrote the original rules in its entirety for the ACBAs.
Yeah, the guidelines. I think she had come up with.
So it's funny. I mean, this is my first time hearing this from you, so we kind of have the same roots, so more or less. And had you begun, had you gotten into homebrewing? I know we've spoken before about how frequently you brew, which I guess we would say is infrequently. And I'm the same, to be honest. As diehard a brewer as I'll tell you I am. It's just time, day job. Even though I work in the industry, I don't have the time.
Right.
So what was your experience with hands-on?
Well,
at that point, had there been any?
A little bit. My dad was a home brewer when I was growing up, so I always saw him brewing, was able to, see what was fermenting. He always had a few little things on the go. So when I started my own brewing, I started like everyone else did with kits and stuff. By the time I was getting into judging was when I had first started doing partial mash. And I was pretty excited about recipes, figuring out that I could actually control a bit more what I'm making and kind of tweak it to my own taste. So that was pretty fun.
Right.
Yeah.
That is kind of an eye-opening experience, that first time you realize, wait a second, I'm going to change out some of those ingredients in that brown ale. Make it a little roastier.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and you start to play around and you get a sense of it. Yeah, so moving forwards, you're the first person or woman, as I understand it, is it in Nova Scotia or in Atlantic Canada?
First woman in Atlantic Canada, first person in Nova Scotia. So
to be a Cicerone.
Yeah, Mike Bueller was in Newfoundland for a couple of years.
Okay.
Doing the Cicerone thing, and then I was the next one in the Atlantic provinces.
Wow.
Yeah.
And is that an important accomplishment for you when you look back? Does that bear a lot of weight for your encouragement to keep going?
Totally. Yeah. I was pretty proud of myself at the time for just kind of coming. Like, people didn't really know me. I didn't live in the Halifax area. I didn't have my hands in a whole lot of beer things on the go here, so becoming the first Cicerone in the area, like, it was kind of something that I really wanted to do. So I was pretty proud of myself.
And you move yourself up the ladder fairly quick when you have that title.
Yeah. Quicker than I wanted, to be honest. But
Well, then all of a sudden, that's right. Angeline, we need your help with
exactly.
this.
Can you come to everything?
Please. We need a face for this.
Yeah.
That's it.
It was pretty cool being not only the first one, though, but actually being the first woman in the area doing it, or that the first person in the area was a woman doing it. I thought that was pretty rad.
And we know, I mean, we can speak from our experience on the East Coast of Canada, but we do know that there is kind of a national, even global kind of movement on the female side of brewing, where women are taking hold of the reins again. We have
there's more visibility.
Yeah, well, like our producer Julie Guy. I mean, she's a woman that is in charge of a beer brand, right? And then we have folks like you that are the first female in Atlantic Canada to know what they're talking about when it comes to beer. So we see, and we have a lot of female brewers. So do you ever think of that side of things, or when you're involved, are you thinking, are you representing women or are you representing beer?
I felt like I used to do a better job of representing the women. I feel like now where I'm at, like, just where I have such little time and it's stretched thin, like, it kind of takes a back seat, but there is the Fembot Brew Fests that happen. There's lots of women-focused beer events, and I'd like to take more of an active role there. But yeah.
But primarily
beer. It's
whatever.
I'm here for the beer.
That's it.
Yeah.
So for those of us who don't know, let's go a little deeper and maybe explain the difference. Myself, I'm certified BJCP, and I know Cicerones, and I've heard about the program, but I actually don't quite know the nitty gritty difference. What do the two scopes? How do they differ?
So the BJCP, I think if anyone wants to get involved in the beer scene, I think that's a really great place to start. For one, it's cheaper. It's a much less expensive exam, and there are lots of groups around. There's always an exam coming up, so there's usually people getting together, tasting beers, talking about how to troubleshoot them. I find it's a really good way to get your foot in the door if you're looking to do something in the industry level like that. The BJCP holds a lot of exams, or they can sanction exams. You get points for doing it. And there's different ranks that you can just take more exams, take more tasting exams, write exams to climb. But it's pretty affordable. Mm-hmm. The Cicerone program is more expensive. Now, when I was going through, there weren't any classes or anything in the area. There are now. The CAPS program offers a program on how to become a Cicerone, but that more covers, it's not just beer tasting and flavors. It goes into the history of brewing. It goes into tap lines and cleaning, and it talks about the history of beer. It talks about all the styles, the same as the BJCP. There is a big tasting component to it, but there's also how to pair beers, different, recipes that you can come up with to pair with beer. Like it's a more in-depth look at beer as a whole. So it's a pretty well-rounded program.
And maybe to go a little deeper to talk about the skill set, because another thing I've heard, I've heard from folks who have been involved on the Cicerone side, that they see the BJCP as being kind of the nitpickers of beer, right? Because, our task is often seen when we're judging as, what can we find wrong with the beer?
Right.
But there's a lot of what can you find good with the beer as well. But, I've heard from the Cicerone side, like, BJCP are just people that like to complain about beer. Cicerones are the ones that like to enjoy beer.
Right. I don't know if I'd agree with that per se. I think that we have a lot of new BJCP judges in the area. A lot of people becoming certified. I think it's a thing, as a new judge, we all go through it, that you want to find those off flavors. You want to be the best at tasting, so you want to pick them out. Mm-hmm. So maybe people are a little eager to be like, oh, this one's acetic, this one's got diacetyl, when maybe it might not have a very high level that is worth mentioning. Right. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I think that, I think the BJCP can be more sticklers, but I feel like over time we're going to probably see that mellow out a little bit in the area too.
Yeah, no, I can speak from my experience. It can be daunting, especially when you're getting into unfamiliar styles. By the time I had written the exam and actually gotten into judging, I wasn't really familiar with, sour styles. And so you have a sour put in front of you, and I don't know, it's infected. I know that much, so I'm not wrong. I can see what you're saying there, that, you're first getting your footing. It can be hard to play fair.
Yeah, I remember I used to call them phantom flavors when I was starting out, because it was like, am I tasting this? And you're tasting it blind, so you're looking really hard to see, you don't want to miss anything, and in the process, maybe you call a few things there.
Yourself.
Exactly, yeah.
But for the folks who haven't been involved, that's kind of why at the end of tasting, we kind of sit and we talk about the beer. What did you...
You confer with your other judges.
Right, yeah. Fill out your score sheet first, so it's totally unbiased and blind, and then kind of... Yeah, that's right. Are there different challenges presented being a Cicerone versus BJCP? Like, what about Cicerone is difficult? What about BJCP is difficult in terms of actually doing the task at hand, or speaking confidently about the beer you're trying?
I would say for the Cicerone, where there are so few of us here in the province right now, like there's still, I think it's under 10, the number of Cicerones that are here, that a lot of people just don't know what it is. Mm-hmm. And even in the industry, like sometimes I still meet people that are in the beer scene but don't know what Cicerone is, but they know the BJCP. Right. Because we do so many competitions, we give feedback that I find that one has a little more, not that it has more credibility, but people are a little quicker to latch onto the BJCP and understand that.
And the BJCP in some respect is sort of the one that's responsible for kickstarting the competition phenomenon and kind of defining the styles. And the Cicerone, for lack of a better term, kind of piggybacks on the Cicerone body is not the one that is designed and developed the style categories. Yeah. That's more the BJCP.
Totally. Cicerone follows the BJCP style categories, but as its own thing. I think it came out a good 20 years after the BJCP. Right. Like its launch was...
Do you see it as a competitive organization, or are they more in a union?
The Cicerone?
Yeah.
There's a few other beer programs as well, beer certification programs that, I think Cicerone tries to compete with.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What is it about judging, about sitting down at a table, knowing you're in for 8 hours of drinking beer that may be good, may be bad, may not pair well together?
Right.
Why do you keep going back?
I really like watching the industry in this area grow. And especially at these competitions, it's mostly homebrew comps that we're judging in this area. We have a few industry level competitions, but knowing that a lot of people are homebrewing for the first time, submitting stuff, and you want to give them good feedback. You want to, encourage them to keep going, keep brewing, because the more they brew, we're seeing a lot of these breweries that are local to us started with homebrewers. The brewers started out that way, so you never know who's brewing at home that could be, really up and coming and making some really great stuff.
Mm-hmm. And then how to tie that into the topic of Cicerone, do you find you have an advantage as a judge being certified in both the Cicerone organization and the BJCP?
I think so.
Does that give a little more to your assessment of the beer?
Sure. I think whereas the BJCP tells you what you're tasting, the Cicerone program will tell you why you're tasting it, so I find it a little easier to troubleshoot.
This is another one, and I find for myself sometimes, especially after competitions, the routine is you go judge beer all day, and then after the session, you all go out and have a pint. For some strange reason.
Because you haven't had enough.
Because you haven't had enough.
You're not sick of it yet.
Or you're just trying to wash that awful taste.
Yeah. You need to forget.
That's right. Not naming names. We all have made bad beers. But does being certified as a Cicerone, and in your case, both as a Cicerone and BJCP, does that take away from your social experience of drinking beer?
It really did for a long time. Even Untapped, I wouldn't download Untapped for a long time because I was like, I'm insufferable to drink with. Like, I can't have a beer with someone without, like, getting on my phone and reading, like, oh, is this a bit dark for style? Like, I'm that person. So I could be a bit of a stickler. I find I'm better at breaking it up now, like, mentally, like, to just enjoy the beer. But when I first started out, like, I was a terrible person to have a beer with.
I'd be good it'd be good for us to drink together, because I went through a similar phase and actually went out with a bunch of the guys from work, and we're at one of those kind of mainstream restaurants, nothing local, nothing craft about it. And, I get an IPA, and the first thing out of my mouth when she puts it in front of me is, it's in the wrong glass.
Right.
Not thank you, but you served it in the wrong glass. She served it in a Pilsner glass.
Right.
And I felt compelled to point that out for some reason. And just the faces everybody was making after that, so... It did for me as well. You just want to support a local brewery, and maybe it's not the best beer on the market,
right,
but it's a good pint. And sometimes I find that hard because in competition, you're looking for why does this beer stand out? Why is this the best beer? Why should this win?
Right.
And
you really analyze the whole thing.
You really analyze.
You're thinking as you're drinking.
And it's almost acceptable to kind of put it through the grinder, whereas when you're in a social setting and everyone's just trying to enjoy themselves, and there may the other thing that caught me off guard is speaking ill about someone's beer on a technical level when the brewer happens to be standing near you, which has happened to me.
Right.
So I learned a lesson there.
Right. Yeah, one of my favorite things is after a competition, going out somewhere and, like, having a water and picking it up and smelling it first, and then being like, I'm an asshole. Like, that's nuts.
Yes, that's
even
right.
beer, like, you're just in the habit of.
Or when you're exactly. You're smelling the beer, getting the aroma, and then you smell your arm or your armpit, and everyone's like, "What are you doing?" Just trying to, like, reset my senses.
Recalibrating.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, recalibrating. Well, and they just. That's the end of it for me there. Then I lose all my friends again. Beer enthusiasts are often given a cheeky title of beer snob. Can you tell me a time, other than the one actually you just told us, that you recall being a beer snob and just kind of really drawing yourself back a step and being like, wait a second.
Right. Well, I think it was one of my first competitions, and I don't want to say I was mean on the sheet, but it was a homebrew comp, and I was definitely, full of piss and vinegar starting out. You want to find every off flavor there is, and there was a beer that was served that I still recall it was probably the worst of the day. and I just, read it to filth on the sheet. I just gave it a lot of harsh criticisms, and it was a week or two later I got a text from my cousin's girlfriend at the time saying, "Why did you hate our beer?" And she told me exactly which one was hers, and I was like, I remember that. It had a very distinct name, and yeah, I remember just being like, okay, like, there are people here behind these beers.
Yes.
Maybe go a little easy on them.
Well, that's it. When you're opening a bottle of beer and it's just you, your co-judge, and that bottle of beer. Yeah. It's easy to just talk real talk.
Yeah.
But yeah, at the end of the day, I think it's nice for judges to remember that there's not only is there a face behind the beer, not only is there a brewer behind the beer, but there's someone behind the beer that's trying to learn and trying to better themselves, and that's really how competitions came about. The origin of the competition is not about who's better. It's about, can you read this information, learn about the technical aspects of the beer, the history of the beer, and can you reproduce it in a fashion true to style?
Totally.
And our responsibility is to try and encourage and coach folks into being able to do that. And often we forget that.
Yeah. My cousin and his girlfriend broke up after that, and I don't want to say it was over the beer, but can't rule it out either.
The timing is too perfect, I think. Angeline, it's been so awesome to talk to you. We're going to take a quick break, and after the break, we're going to come back and have a chat with Stefan Gagliardi.
Healthy yeast can mean the difference between, oh, you made this, and, oh, you made this? Your homebrew deserves the healthiest yeast possible. Introducing Proper Starter. No more messy dried malt extract. No more boiling and cooling wort. All you need is 1 can of Proper Starter, a sanitized 2-liter container, and your yeast. Just pour Proper Starter into your sanitized container, add an equal amount of water, and add your yeast. Cover with foil or an airlock and wait for your brew day. Proper Starter, convenience in a can. Now available at Brew HQ. And now it's time for What's in Your Fermenter?
All right, we're back here with Angeline McLennan at the Brew HQ headquarters, and it is What's in Your Fermenter. So tell us, Angeline, what is in your fermenter?
Nothing.
And that's What's in Your Fermenter with Angeline McLennan, apparently. We're here with Stefan Gagliardi, BJCP certified Cicerone, and master brewer at the historic Halifax Keiths Brewery. Stefan, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jonathan. Glad to be here.
Yes, all right. So before we jump in, we are tasting one of your fine beverages, Le Passage. It is a Gosa. Did I say that right?
Yep, Le Passage.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
All right. So a little French lesson there. But why don't you take us through it's absolutely delicious. It's stunning. Nice. I'll let you take it from there and describe what style it is and how you went about making it.
Right on. So it's a Goza, which is a German historic beer style. It's a wheat beer that is soured and then flavored with salt and coriander. Pretty unique. I came about this concept of making a Goza because I always found myself falling short on what to eat with lobster, what to drink with lobster, and finding only champagne as a good pairing, and finding it very pricey. So I figured there was a solution to that, and I kind of dug around, tried different beers with lots of lobster, and fell on Goza. Just really the salinity kind of emphasizes the sea flavors of the lobster, but the dryness and the roundness of the wheat kind of come play together and build a little bit of delicate character. And then the coriander is just like the extra fluff that plays with the garlic and the lobster and the butter dip. So that was the main idea here. And then we went a little bit deeper, found someone that was making salt locally. So Tidal Salt makes sea salt from the waters in Eastern Passage right by my house, which is where the name comes from, Le Passage. And then incorporated that as an ingredient to really give it some maritime flavor and take the terroir off land and into the ocean.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, it's a great beer, and also the cans you have here are beautiful, gorgeous designs, really nice, well thought out. So lots of good stuff coming out of your brewery there.
Really excited to share the graphics. It was really fun to design these. I'm very close to them. Worked with a design team at National, which is a firm downtown Halifax that does marketing and stuff like that.
Are we the first ones seeing these?
You are the first public eye that has
Holy
seen them.
smokes. There we go. Yeah, they're gorgeous.
Drop that as an exclusive on your podcast.
Yes, we will. That's very cool. Thanks for sharing. And then we were also talking a little bit before we started, and you were telling us a little bit about yeast management on a grand scale. I mean, this episode is not about commercial brewing, but we love to hear cool things whenever we can. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about the yeast management that your company uses?
So Alexander Keiths is owned by Labatt, which is owned by AB InBev, and it is the world's largest brewer. So we have a pretty intricate system for yeast management. I like to keep a lot of the beers playing on the simple side for yeast. So I use a lot of Keiths yeast for most of our base recipes. Makes it really easy for me to manage my brewery. But beyond my brewery, how we manage our yeast is really interesting. So there's 2 mother yeast plants that are spread across the world. So one of them's in Leuven, Belgium. The other one's in St. Louis in the United States. And they both bank all the yeast that we brew with, from Budweiser to Stella to Hoegaarden to Keiths. And there's 2 in case one gets attacked or blows up in nuclear warfare or something like that. We wouldn't lose all our proprietary yeast strains and that sort of stuff.
So that they're prepared for nuclear warfare. So like if I stroll up, what am I met with at the door to this place?
Yeah, so I have gotten as close as the gate, and there's a door behind it, and that's about it. So it's a well-kept secret operation that unless you have the access and the permissions to get into, you will not see it, even if I'm like a brewmaster in the company. No. And in these plants, they basically go from the mother source of each yeast. They grow up slants, so these really small, like 2 milliliter vials. They ship those out to all the breweries that operate with that particular yeast. And we usually do something like 10 to 12 generations per slant. So we'll prop that up at a brewery scale. Olin does the hard work for me. I show up with a corny keg, steal it from the yeast brink, and then bring it home.
Wave goodbye,
and make about 12 batches of beer with it until we see that it's no longer giving us what we want. And Keiths yeast is one that stops developing diacetyl relatively quickly when it's stressed, so we know we're in trouble when our diacetyl starts spiking.
I see. Excellent. Very cool. So let's go back in time a little bit, though, because obviously to get to where you're at, there's a bit of a journey. So can you talk a little bit about what type of training you've had to go through and what experience you've had going through that training to actually get in the position, hold the position you have?
Yeah, absolutely. So what Labatt is really good at is training on a sensory side for defects. We are extremely sensitive to defects because a lot of the beers don't have much to hide behind. So we have low thresholds analytically and train to be on a sensory level just as good at picking it out. At Labatt, we do sensory training as a group. So whether you're the new kid in the lab or the plant manager, you sit at the same table and taste the same beers as the plant manager, the brewmaster, the quality manager every day.
So everyone has an opinion.
Correct.
And everyone's opinion, by extension, is valid. So the whole team gets to go in on the beer, and everyone gives their opinion, and then obviously there's some learning from the top down that takes place. So it kind of chimes into, historically a brewmaster was just a guy that had been doing all the brewing for years. And the way he became the brewmaster essentially was he had to go do all the slag work for, his predecessor.
That's exactly it.
And so on some level, that's still happening.
Yep. So, I really like it. I worked with some extremely talented quality managers and brewmasters over the last 11 years in Montreal, in St. John's, and in Halifax. And yeah, that's exactly how it happens. You have very skilled tasters, and we all share vocally what we find in the beers, and that's how you learn. So you go back to your glass and, like someone picked up isoamyl acetate, the banana flavor. You go back and you try and smell that, and you're like, oh, okay, I detect it. And if you don't, you can have a conversation. You're like, what kind of banana? Is it like banana syrup? Is it banana ice cream? Is it, brown banana, green banana? And you get to learn what that person is calling banana and figure out how you're going to be able to describe it. Mm-hmm. So pair that with a lot of threshold testing. So we basically test ourselves with samples that are spiked right down to 10 ppbs of diacetyl acetaldehyde, DMS, and 4-VG. Mm-hmm. And we have to do that quarterly and record it in the system to demonstrate like the progress, and then people do trends and charts and graphs. And then the third component that really helps like the training at Labatt is we send the beers that we judge to St. Louis for the master taste panel to judge, and then they send us feedback as well. Okay. So as a brewery, we're not just speaking to ourselves. Right. We're being compared to every other brewery in North America for Budweiser, Bud Light, Michelob Ultra. And then we're getting the feedback on those beers. And then we're learning from that as well, because we can go back and be like, oh, everybody called this seltzery, like a little bit like Perrier water. Okay, we go back, figure out why, or if there's a defect, we learn from that. So that's my professional component of it. Right. There's obviously a passion for beer where I've always experimented with homebrewing and visiting as many breweries as possible and experiencing the flavors they had to offer. And that's what really pushed me to start judging beer contests, writing, and then finally doing my certified Cicerone. So certified Cicerone was 6 months of intense sitting down, reading, and tasting lots and lots and lots of beers and finding the nuances between a 4% stout and a 7% stout. Right. And by the time I finished studying for the exam for Cicerone, I turned around and looked at the BJCP exam, realized it was exactly the same, and wrote it right on a whim and made it to the tasting component nice. A couple of months later.
Right, yeah. So you're talking about the BJCP pre-entry exam.
Correct.
You do online. I think it's like 200 questions in an hour.
Yep.
And that grants you, what do they call it?
Provisional
judge, that's right. And then when you do the tasting portion, if you pass that, you actually get your certification. Very cool. And is it common, you're a fairly young fella, is it common, throughout your peer group, you must know a lot of the brewers for young guys like yourself to be really, like, I always pictured like the Brewmaster, okay, where's this disgruntled old man, he probably doesn't even drink beer anymore, he's just brewing, and he's just angry all the time, but that's not who you are.
That is not who I am. And I get that a lot. Like, I show up, I'm like, hey, I'm Stefan, I'm the Brewmaster, put my hand out to shake, and people kind of step back and, like, give me a weird look and go, where's your belly and where's your beard? And are you sure you're allowed to drink? Especially on days I shave. Yeah. The Brewmasters that, there's, with the whole change in dynamics of the breweries and stuff like that, in a big brewery, it tends to take more experience to be a brewmaster because you're in charge of an operation of 1 million hectoliters or more annually. And that comes with a lot of financials behind it. So you tend to have more experienced individuals in those roles. But it's not to say that... I could easily go back to a brewery if I wanted to, at one of our big breweries, and continue my career on a brewmaster level at that scale too. Like, Labatt's great for allowing you to progress at the speed you want, and if you're showing the capabilities to do the job, they will give it to you, right. And challenge you to the next step. So
that's very cool.
Yeah,
good. And you did mention, obviously, you were interested in beer. You found your love for beer before entering the industry, and were you also a home brewer?
I started brewing when I started doing technical program with Labatt on brewing, and I was in the packaging department.
Okay.
So I started home brewing about a year after I started working as a professional brewer. But I was in the packaging side, so I wanted to get way more hands-on.
You went a bit reverse.
Yeah, but I had been an avid beer fan pretty much from day one. I did a chemical engineering degree at McGill, and the options were go make oil, work in shampoo, or make beer. And, you know...
It's kind of obvious.
Yeah, the freebies that come with option 3 were way better than option 1 and 2, so
excellent. Just
stuck with it.
And you still have great hair, so you didn't really need the shampoo.
Oh, geez, thanks.
Let's talk a little bit more about the certification, the BJCP in particular, from the point of view of someone who is in the industry and who has climbed the ranks in the industry, so to speak. What did you hope to gain, or what have you gained from actually certifying in BJCP or in Cicerone as well?
So for the BJCP side specifically, it's a bit different from Cicerone. BJCP is really being technical about style guidelines. It's really for judging and for true to style beers. And I think that's important because, you know, I'm going to butcher this phrase, but, you know, it's like Shakespeare. Shakespeare's allowed to break all the rules in grammar because he knows them all. And I think the same thing's true in beer, especially nowadays where, you know, anything under the sun can go into a beer, and I'm first to throw seaweed at a beer, so, you know, I'm guilty as charged on that. But I think if you don't understand the foundations, or if you do something like BJCP and you go see what that true style is, and you perfect that, and then build from there, it gives you a better understanding and a better balance in a beer, because whether you're making a Goza or a double IPA, balance is crucial to make something that is going to be widely approachable and enjoyable.
So in some ways, ultimately, it gives you better insight into recipe design and into more creativity in your recipe design, especially it sounds like when it comes to specialty ingredients. You brought some other beer here. You have a coffee and cacao nib stout. You have a hoppy lager, and then of course the Goza with the local sea salt. So do you feel that you have kind of that competitive advantage when it comes to your work or even to your home brewing when designing a recipe because of the BJCP and Cicerone certification and all that work that went into it?
I mean, I wouldn't call it a competitive advantage. I would just, it's my style of approaching it. Like, everybody has their own philosophies and their own methods of approaching beer. I always, you know, I like bold beers, but I like balance and drinkability. Like, those have to come with it. But you nailed it in the recipe design. It's really helped me professionally from a recipe design aspect, and make sure that, you know, when I'm looking at something, I'm thinking of, you know, what was this originally, and how do I want to change it? How do I want to put my mark on it? Or do I just want to make what people intended this to be? And the other part professionally is when I enter beers and beer contests. I think being a certified BJCP judge gives you an advantage because you have sat at the table. You know how people are going to interpret different lines in that guideline, and it does give me it prepares me to better put my beers in the right categories. I still make mistakes sometimes because different judges in different countries will interpret things differently. They'll use different guidelines. But I read a new guideline from something in Germany, and, you know, I can start thinking of how they're going to deconstruct that and how they're going to apply it to my beer. So from a competition level, it becomes a little bit of an opportunity for me to tap into.
Right. Yeah. Very cool. And we did speak a little bit earlier. You were talking about some of your preparations for examination. Do you have any particular ideas for people out there who are either just interested in you know, the proper way to taste a beer, or want to try and achieve Cicerone or BJCP status, what kind of study guides, what kind of study methods do you use?
So I think you have to know how to learn before you can enter certified Cicerone, and even BJCP, I would say as well. I'll put them both together. I realized I knew my method of learning was pure, just rereading it over and over and over again, and just pure memory, just committed to memory. And that's how I know I will be able to pass a test. I will pass it with flying colors. But it is excruciatingly painful. I've got this beautiful Casio watch. I put my timer on, and my wife thinks I'm absolutely nuts, and I will sit at the table for 8 hours timed, excluding pee breaks and lunch break, and just commit to memory nonstop. That's how I managed to do these from the theoretical side. And then from the tasting side, it was a lot of samples and a lot of happy neighbors. So I basically would come home from one of the liquor stores with every Belgian beer I could get my hands on, from an Enkel right to a quad, and I would get someone to line them up blind, and I would have to pinpoint which one was which. And then the next night I would have 5 different stouts ranging from 3.9% to 8%. Get someone to set them up blind and just go for it. And then the last thing I did as a surprise to myself is I stopped going to the beer fridge. So you've seen the beer fridge.
I have seen the beer fridge.
It has about 100 beers. There's one shelf that is you must share with me shelf. And then there's a bottom shelf that's free for all. And I basically stopped going to the beer fridge. I sent my wife down. She would go down with a glass. She would open it downstairs so I couldn't tell if it was a bottle or a can, because sometimes I could tell she had a can in her hands if she brought it up, just by the sound. And I would take a crack at guessing what I was drinking for 6 months straight. I wouldn't order beers at the bar, go to Stillwell, sit back against the taps, ask someone else to order something for me. It was pretty fun.
Yeah, this was like a community event, is getting Stefan's certification. Everyone was involved in this.
Pretty much, yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, I feel like we did a tasting.
Well, we did do a tasting actually, and you mentioned earlier you were talking about them spiking drinks or whatever.
Yes.
So, and that's what we did. We did kind of a sensory experiment where we got some off flavors from an off flavor kit offered by Cibal down in Chicago, Cibal Institute, however you pronounce it, and then we had a friend of yours spike it with the different flavors, and then our task was to figure out exactly what beer flaw was in those beers, and that was quite interesting. That's the first time I had actually done that, aside from drinking a beer with a fault in it and knowing there was something wrong. So it was even more difficult knowing that there were going to be faults in the beer, and I had to figure out which one they were. But it was quite good. I think I got them all right. The only one I got wrong is I remember we did diacetyl, and you said, well, there's a difference between diacetyl and more of I can't even remember how you described it. More of a rancid butter.
We had two samples. One was diacetyl, one was infected lines.
Yeah.
And then the diacetyl would be like more of a fermentation defect where the yeast didn't have the opportunity to reabsorb it into a non-flavor active component.
Right.
And that's more of a silky butter and more like butterscotch kind of character. But and again, this depends on you as a human and how you perceive it. And then the infected tap is a blend of diacetyl and an infection from pediococcus, so it would be like a burn, like it would be like the rancid butter, like a butter with an acidic edge to it.
Right. And that's the one I kind of wavered on because I picked up the butter and I said diacetyl, but I didn't catch the contamination because I was so focused on the first second I could taste butter, and that's all I thought about after that.
It's subtleties in the details.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was very, very interesting. So get a group of friends and drink a lot of beer, and then you can be a certified beer judge. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, as long as you're taking lots of notes. And I guess if you're looking to start getting into it, what I always tell people is do the high five test. So every time you grab a beer, you put your hand in the air and you start counting down 5 adjectives to describe the beer. So you go, it's really simple to start it off. You do one color. So it's yellow. Okay. Now move on to what does it smell like? Okay. Are we drinking a stout? Oh, it smells like coffee. You're at 2. Move on to what it tastes like. Oh, well, it tastes like coffee, like roasted coffee. You're at 3. And then how does it feel in your mouth? Oh, it's full body. 4. And you got one thing left to say about it. You've only said one very general thing about your beer so far. So you have to dig deep on one of them. And if you're lazy, you can describe the color of your foam. But just to not get you got to stay motivated, right? It's supposed to be fun. Right. So you start like that, and then as you do this more often, you're gonna get either 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 items out, or you're gonna go into way more specific. Is that like a medium roast fruity coffee, or is it like more earthy, or is that just French roast burnt in like the roaster, right? And getting into the details like that. Oh, it tastes like chocolate. Oh, well, what kind of chocolate? Like Cadbury chocolate, dark chocolate, raw chocolate, sweet chocolate, milk chocolate. You can go into the details and just keep peeling the onion. And basically you just got to start really general and then get more specific. And the more you say it out loud and the more you discuss with people, the easier it becomes, because the hard part is saying it out loud, putting it into words that someone else understands.
So you're almost you kind of mentioned earlier, you have to like to learn or be able to learn, and in a sense you're arming yourself with a vocabulary to describe beer, and the more adjectives you come up with to describe beer, the more you have in your arsenal to really break down a beer when you drink it.
It's like you've already judged this beer stuff or something. That's exactly what it is. And to put it in perspective, in the world, 80% of us are just normal tasters.
Right.
10% of us are super tasters, which means we are more sensitive to all flavors in all the world. And then 10% of us can't taste a lemon from an apple.
Right.
I don't fall in the super tasters by any means. I am well aware that I'm just a normal dude that tries to not burn his tongue. The hard part is the vocabulary part. So once you do that, and you can do it with anything. You can do it with chocolate, you can do it with coffees, hell, you can do it with sodas.
Yeah, well, that's actually how I got into it, as I took a professional chocolate program, and a whole portion of the class was how to taste chocolate and how to describe chocolate. And from there, I got into coffee, and from there, I got into beer. So it's kind of, the theology of taste, they called it. Yeah.
Nice.
So earlier we did interview another Cicerone, Angeline McLennan. I asked her how being a certified BJCP judge might have a negative impact on her social enjoyment of beer. I'd like to hear your take on that matter. And I hear you're laughing already, and I know because it's a polarizing subject. For some people, they can't drink beer anymore socially. It's ruined for them because they're busy picking out the flaws and the faults or what's right, or and then some folks are it enhances their enjoyment because now they understand what they're tasting. And then there's some folks like myself who just don't care. I drink a beer when I can get my hands on it.
Yeah, it can be a struggle. I think I've been doing it enough that I'm over the hump on that one. There was a time where I'd go to a beer fest and I was just analyzing and just telling everyone what I'm analyzing, and sometimes ruining beers for people, sometimes not, because I'm like, oh my gosh, did you taste this? And they were like, no, but now I do. And it's a natural progression now. I am over it. I can turn it on and off. I don't drink samples anymore. I drink full pints because at one point that's all we were drinking, and it was just constant work and constant analyzing. If I need to do that, I will buy a bunch of beer, bring it to the brewery, do it in a setting, and do sampling, and not drink for enjoyment, but drink to determine what's going on. And we do this with our beers internally, but we also do it with what's in the market as well. Sometimes we're trying to see where we want to go. So now what mostly happens is as I drink a pint of something, there's a 30 seconds where if you know me really well, I disappear into the glass. A few of my friends know when this is happening. They just shut up. They let me do it, and then I come back and I jump right back into the conversation. And that'll pretty much happen every pint of something new. If it's something familiar, it takes me 10 seconds to process it. I'm like, that's there. Nailed it. Great brew, Brewer X. And then I smile and I enjoy it.
Excellent. Very cool.
And now it's time for What's in Your Fermenter?
Stefan, what do you have in your fermenter right now? Or in your many fermenters, as it may be?
Yep, so we got 9 fermenters on the go. We are at capacity. You guys caught me at the tail end of loading in for our new can line. So there is a lot of stout, there's a lot of Goza, and there's a lot of hoppy lager. And it's all going into cans for the NSLC. There's a Pils hanging out on the corner of the room. And there's a couple of beers in the cellar that are bottle conditioning as we speak. And one of them is a wine hybrid made with Sangiovese grape concentrate. And the other one is a toaster pastry stout that was barrel aged that is now bottle conditioning.
Of course it is.
Yeah. Only the finest for the best.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. That was What's in Your Fermenter. All right, that's everything for today. Thank you guys again so much for joining us here on Pitch and Prime. If you could do us a favor, rate and review us on iTunes. It always helps bump the numbers, and then we can bring you better content. We'll see you here next time.